Welcome to the LeaderImpact podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities around the world dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make this show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social at LeaderImpact. If you're listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Josh Erb. Josh is a visionary leader sold out to the Jesus model of raising and equipping Christian world changers. He co-founded Soul Edge Ministries with his twin brother when he was 19 and has now led the charity with his wife, Kiri, for over 18 years. Over the years, he has personally mentored and helped equip hundreds of leaders. Josh serves as pastor at Northgate Church in the Comox Valley, BC. He's qualified hiking guide and loves spending time in the mountains. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Aw, thank you, Lisa. So good to be with you.
It is so nice to see you again. For our viewers, Josh and I met at the Apologetics Conference. I flew down to Abbotsford. And as we were talking, we know the same people, which is funny. You are originally from Saskatchewan.
I am. Yeah, I grew up actually just outside of Calgary. And then when I was 12 years old, my family bought a ranch out in Saskatchewan.
Ranch.
So spent lots of time in Saskatchewan. I deeply love the Saskatchewan people. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's fair enough. We think we're fabulous. However, I did like your weather in Abbotsford when I was there, because I think I left minus 30 and it was like, I don't know, 12.
It's true. The West Coast is nice for that.
Yeah. So nice move out there. Well done.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your professional story and sort of how you got to where you are today. And we're really looking for those pivotal moments. And I really hope maybe you can share more about Soul Edge Ministries. I mean, I hope that's part of the pivotal, because I'm not sure if people really know what it is, but I'm super excited to hear your journey.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Soul Edge is a big part of my story. So I think a great place to kind of start is that key age when I left high school and actually went to the UK to train with the ministry in the UK. And during that time was really just, I had in my mind that I would be going to engineering school after a year of training, and was accepted actually to go to the U of S and was essentially just saying, okay, here's my plan, Jesus. I'll take a year of growth and then I'll pursue engineering. But during that year, I really, my brother and I we started to essentially dream together about what it would look like to invest intentionally into young men and women. Really, we had leaders in our lives who had mentored us, who had discipled us, and we saw the impact that had on our lives. And so we started with a question like, what would it look like to create a course that really was designed for leadership development? What would that look like? And we were essentially dreaming about a course that we thought we would be launching when we were like 30 or 40. We're like, let's dream about what would it look like to take a group of young men or a group of young women on a journey of intentional growth. And we just I remember going out for coffee and journaling down as a 19-year-old, like, what would this look like? What is the ideal environment for growth? Some of those kind of questions. And then during that season, I felt like the Lord had said, actually, I don't want you to go to engineering school. I want you to lay that down. And that was scary, obviously. And ended up sharing the vision of Soul Edge with one of my key leaders and mentors there. And he was like, you and your brother are young, but I think you guys should go for it. I'm going to get behind you guys. You should launch this ministry of Soul Edge. And so Soul Edge was launched when we were 19 years old, which is pretty young. But essentially, we had leaders who got behind us and said, "Hey, we believe in you, and we want to see this vision born," which was incredible. So that really was the start of me kind of stepping into leadership development as a 19-year-old, being like, all right, we're going to do this. And so what is Soul Edge? Soul Edge it originally started as a 5-month intensive course. So we do 3 months of training and then 2 months of outreach. And we started by doing outreach in Africa. And the kind of key difference is people, when they hear 5 months, are like, YWAM, right? Because YWAM is a 5-month model. So similarities, but the biggest difference was that we had have a high ratio of mentors to mentees. So it's like 1 to 4. And so there's a really big focus on the mentoring. And then we incorporate adventure. That the adventure element is a big part where when we think about leaders, what is the key foundation to leadership? Character. And so how do you actually, when you think about like leadership training, so much of like growth happens for leaders when they're under pressure and then they're getting coached through that. And so for us, we're like, how do we create environments of pressure that our mentors can actually see the mentees in some pressure so that they can coach them? And so for us, the outdoors is the element of pressure, team building, and there's a lot that can happen that you can kind of customize growth environments in the outdoors in some great and unique ways. So that's the kind of adventure part. And also adventure is just great. It's so fun. So we get to take our teams out into the mountains, snowshoeing, snow camping, skiing, canoeing, all that kind of stuff. And it's a real gift. So we've been doing Soul Edge for over 19 years. I now have a course on Vancouver Island that we run. And we also have another base in New Zealand, close to Christchurch. So every year we're bringing teams of 12 students to go on these courses. And it's amazing to see the transformation that happened. So that was a really kind of pivotal moment, being a 19-year-old and having a leader say, hey, I believe in you. And then kind of started down that journey of what does it look like to build a charity, to start a course, to start investing into young leaders.
So at 19, you make this decision. I'm just because my kids are 20 and 22 and, you're 19, you didn't go to university. You call your parents and say, by the way, and these are your twins. So there's 2 of you, by the way, mom, dad, we're not going to university. What was that reaction? Because that is a big pivotal moment. So I'm just looking for the reaction of the people around you. They're like, was it well done or?
Yeah, actually, my parents, to their credit, they're hugely supportive. So they're just like, yeah, we think you guys have this in you. And they're like, what do we need to do to help you get this going? And there was a lot of support. And I think, we had been given quite a lot of responsibility from a young age, even just growing up on a ranch. I was, of the generation where we started driving tractors really young. So it just like responsibility was kind of inbuilt into my kind of growing up years. So then stepping into a role where you're then responsible for other people, it wasn't like, they weren't like, wow, you've never done anything like this, that we'd been leaders in our youth group and leaders in the church. So it was kind of the next step in one, still a big step, but it was within reach.
Yeah. That makes me laugh that you say you were of a generation where the kids drove tractors at a young age. I think they still do in Saskatchewan.
They do. It's true, yeah.
We haven't learned. They're still 12-year-olds driving farm trucks. But we want to talk to you about your best principle of success, and if you have what it is, and if you have a story that illustrates that.
I think it probably there's lots of like things that I would say have been huge, but the key one I think for me would be around mentoring. That ultimately, I think when I think of like leaders who have stayed with me, who have gone on to become team leaders, whether that's in the church world or in Soul Edge, ultimately, especially in the world of like church and charity, we don't have this sort of like financial piece to hold up as a motivator, maybe as much. But what I've found is like amazing people will continue to come back and say, yes, I want to serve. I want to be with you. And ultimately they're saying yes, one, to the opportunity to grow, but 2, they're also saying yes because that they are feeling built into, that they know that if they say yes to journeying with you, that they are receiving something back. And so really found that taking that time to invest into my up and coming leaders, to mentor them, to pour into their lives, there's not a guarantee, right? They might be like, I'm going on to the next thing. But the potential for them to say yes is much higher. Now, I've obviously mentored lots of leaders, lots of team leaders have been with me for seasons of 3 to 4 years and then go on to be leaders within church ministries and stuff. And that's great. And ultimately, that is my goal, to raise up leaders. And it's always sad when you work with people for a long time and you're like, man, you're amazing. I've invested into you. And now you're like operating kind of in your peak skill and competency, and now I'm releasing you. There's always a sadness there, but there's also a joy, I think, when we get to have that season. So I think that investment in mentoring and taking time to mentor is always worthwhile, even if we don't know how long that season is. I think the payoffs are huge. And in the kingdom of God, it is, I think, a key and vital aspect, and what Jesus modeled. Um, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. It is tough to mentor someone and then they go on, but isn't that like raising children? Our goal is to raise them, and then we do a good job, and then we let them go, and they go and be good people in the world.
Yeah,
So now I know when I believe I read your website, I believe Soul Edge is like young adults between 19 and 25. Is that right?
yeah, that's right.
So are your leaders, are they coming in at 19, they've joined you, and then they become like, are some of them staying to help you?
Yeah, so that is kind of the model is essentially that students will come in typically at that like 19 or 20, so either pre-university or post, and then they'll do the course. And typically, what we'll do is during the course we'll identify potential future leaders, and then we would always encourage them to take a few years. So the majority of our leaders go on to do their university degree, and then after that season of 3 to 4 years, we invite them back as leaders. So they're typically coming back as 24 or 25 or 27-year-olds, somewhere in that age range. So they're still in their 20s, still in that season of life, often not married, have a bit more flexibility in their time. But it really is through that relational connection, that ongoing mentoring. And then what they received on Soul Edge, they're like, I'd love to give that back. I'd love to see that happen for someone else and be a part of that. So yeah, that really is the model. I mean, one of our leaders went through Soul Edge as a student in 2010, as an example, and his name was Seb Gray. He's now our New Zealand director. So he did the course and then came back as a leader, led for more than that, 4 years, and then trained in the UK in the outdoor industry. And then I kept mentoring him that whole time. And then we started dreaming together about what would it look like to launch a base. Where would that be? And he was like, yeah, I'll go wherever. And he really discerned that it was New Zealand. And then we launched Soul Edge New Zealand in 2020. So I think, yeah, that relational, so much of like when we see things really moving forward is that relational equity that we have with people that enables us to see things move forward. Because really any organization is only as strong as its people, as its team. And vision is hollow unless you have people who kind of take hold of it. So I could be a visionary leader casting vision everywhere, but if I don't have team, if I don't have people who are like, man, I've walked in this, I know what it is, and I know how to embody this, how to live this out, it's going to be hollow vision. And so that sort of mentoring piece is the key bridge of translating vision into kind of reality. And I think there is a consistency that's needed there. Sometimes when life gets full, it takes a lot of intentionality. Like, as you know, like whether it's home or business, there's always tasks and demands. And so you have to really guard, like, where's the time for me to invest into my team, into the few people that I really feel God has highlighted to mentor. And that, I think, just requires a lot of intentionality to make sure that it happens.
Yeah. I love, that's a great principle of success. I don't think anyone's ever talked about using, I don't think we have. So great. I'm interested. I mean, we all know that we learn more from our failures and mistakes than our successes.
Yeah.
Tough one, but we know it works. And I was wondering if you could share one of your greatest failures and what you learned from it. Because so far your pivots have been awesome. So I'm waiting.
Oh, that's great. When I saw this question, I'm like, wow, there's so many mistakes. Which one do I share? But I think the one that really stands out is one that, especially coming from the pastoral world, I get to sit across the table from lots of people, and especially in the West in particular, we struggle with essentially the busyness of our lives, the demands of our lives, and being discipled by kind of the world where it's you got to do more, you got to work harder, perform more, and we can end up, so many leaders are just tired and burnt out. And for me, the key principle that I failed to follow was essentially Sabbath. for years. I think of the early years of ministry. I started pastoring when I was 24, was doing Soul Edge as well. And I would take I'd call them like half Sabbath. So I'd take like Saturday afternoon, I'd kind of block out 4 hours. But it wasn't that full 24-hour period of rest. I wasn't really guarding. I wasn't modeling it to my family. I wasn't guarding it. I just was like, oh, there's emails, there's demands, there's things I have to do. And so it kept edging in. And when I think of sort of the result or the impact of that, it's pretty negative. And it wasn't until I started to say, actually, this is essential. I will burn out as a leader. I'm not going to make it in the long run if I don't sort this out, if I don't sort out Sabbath rest. And when I started to practice Sabbath, that full 24 hours, it really goes at the heart of acknowledging like your limitations. And this is essential, that we have to, as leaders, say we are limited. We will never, at the end of the week, there will always be another email to answer. There'll always be another task to complete. And you simply cannot meet all of the demands. So you must accept your limitation. I was thinking, I came across C.S. Lewis articulated this really well a number of years ago. He wrote this, and I'll just read the quote because it's so good. He says, "The main thing we learn from a serious attempt to practice the Christian virtue is that we fail. If there was any idea that God had set us some sort of exam and that we might get good marks by deserving them, that must be wiped out. This self-awareness of inadequacy, which also may be a kind of gift, it drives us to Christ." It was Spurgeon, I think, who said, "I have learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages." And this self-awareness makes our message authentic and vital. It also removes pretense from our presentation of the gospel. We don't have to put on airs for people come to Jesus desperately. And we can look to the people who are discovering that desperation in their own lives and speak to them with authority out of our brokenness and out of our discovery of God's grace to meet us in those places. And so it's really that journey as leaders to essentially be honest and acknowledge our limitations. If we can't do that, we're going to end up hurting people, and we're going to end up actually making some pretty big mistakes as leaders. And it's really actually the power of the gospel starts to be made manifest when we can be honest about our limitations. And this is really where we see the gospel showing up in big ways. So for me, essentially, Sabbath is the biggest like lesson and practice that I know I have to guard, and it ultimately is that constant reminder of I need grace. I am limited. You can grow your capacity. You can become more efficient. All these things are good skills and tools, but ultimately you will always run into your limitation, and you have to be honest about your limitations.
Yeah. Just listening to you, I think of a book that we read. We just talked about boundaries, and you have to set your own boundaries, because if you don't, someone else will just come in and make them for you, and they'll tell you your boundaries. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think when people, there's too much perfection. We want to be perfect, and we can't be. Like
No.
we will never be. And I mean, that's part of the story. We won't be perfect. We will strive, and we will make mistakes, and we will fail, and we will learn.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So at Leader Impact, we want to grow personally, professionally, and spiritually for increasing impact. So I'm wondering if you're willing to share an example of how the spiritual makes a practical difference in your life as a leader.
Yeah. There's so many areas, but I would say for me, especially when it comes to leadership, as you kind of progress into leadership, it's like the stakes in a way get higher. I remember in a discernment season where I was making a decision around a move actually to the West Coast from Saskatchewan. And part of that decision, you realize is like, wow, it impacts me, it impacts my family, but it also impacts all the people we're connected to. So essentially, if you're investing well in relationship, your relational network gets bigger. And then when you're making a decision, it doesn't just isolate. It's not just that like that decision just happens in your world. It kind of is like has ripple effects. And good leaders, essentially, the way they live should have ripple effects how we live. So I think decision making is always important, but it has bigger and bigger kind of potential impact the more connected and relationally we're responsible. And so decision making then is like this vital place of like we don't want to be just reactionary leaders. We actually need to have discernment. Um, and discernment is a process, and one of the key aspects for me as a leader is that faith aspect of that I believe that God speaks and can guide in decision making. um, so when I think of sort of the sort of discernment process, if you will, it's I like thinking of like cycles that you move through. And so for me, there's kind of a few stages that we must go through in a discernment process. And so the first, before we even get on the stage, the first is acknowledging driving desires that we actually have to be honest about things that are powerful longings or desires within us, because these have a huge impact, whether consciously or subconsciously, they will drive us. We'd like to think that we're very rational, like, oh, I'm so rational in my decisions, but we're actually more emotional and very driven by sort of strong desires, strong longings. So that's kind of the first step, is to acknowledge those. And then the second, I think, this is to get onto the cycle is actually to do that stage of information gathering, where it's like, okay, all the things like what are the, say a young person moving to city, what are the costs? What's the job opportunity? All those kind of things. Now, often as people, we can kind of like imagine that future. Say the young person, like, I just can't wait for life in the city, and they imagine that future. But they're in their decision making, they might apply for a job there, but they get accepted, but they're saying yes to their fantasy, not necessarily yes to that job. And so that discipline of what does actually look like is the information gathering stage. And then the next stage would be wise counsel, where we actually submit ourselves to share a clear picture of what this actually looks like, and people who understand our blind spots and can call those out. That's, I think, a really vital part of discernment, that we have that wise counsel. And then the next step would be that we go to prayer. And this is really where we have to be willing to move whatever the thing is that we're deciding, to a place of we're holding it open-handedly, say, I surrender this, Jesus. It can be a yes or a no. And that's most of the process, right? Uh, is coming to surrender. Once we've surrendered, then it's much easier to hear. If I'm trying to hear and I'm closed-fisted and I'm saying, I want this, Jesus, please say yes, it's hard to hear. But if we can get to a place of surrender, then we're in a place where we could hear his direction. And then once we've sat there and felt like we've heard something from the Lord, the next step or the next kind of movement in the cycle would be to take some sort of action, whether that's, I need to restart that cycle, or it's, I'm going to apply for this job, or whatever the next step is, but we're taking some sort of action. And I think deliberately moving through those steps, not getting stuck in one of them, because we can all do that. We can get stuck somewhere. That we stay in the movement is vital. But for me, obviously, as a Christian, I believe that hearing the voice of God is vital, that I don't want to be moving, especially making big decisions, without that direction and that guidance.
Do you, I believe I know the answer to this, but you do this for everything you do. Like when there's a decision, there's prayer involved, and there's the, acknowledge the desires, info gathering, wise counsel, go to prayer, take action. This is constant. And you probably mentor so many with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really good practice. It's not like a new practice. I think we see Jesus doing this. We see healthy leaders. Essentially, the movement is a movement of health. It's a movement of honesty and a movement that invites community. And I think our individualistic society often erodes these types of practices. And so we have to sort of fight against it. Like our society, like cultures us like, you should be strong. You should be decisive as a leader. And it's like, yes, we should be decisive of a leader, but we cannot make the mistake that, fast is decisive necessarily. Like fast could just be you making a fast decision wrong. That we actually need to take that. There is often a time process involved in discernment, and we have to give ourselves permission to take time to actually move through it well. Yeah.
Oh, great conversation. Because I think people, big or small, you should this process. And people who are listening, I mean, may not be strong in their faith, and they don't understand when you say that. So I have appreciated you just walking us through the steps, because that was clear. Like you made that process very clear on how you get to a decision. It's not just, you know what, I'm just going to pray, or I know the answer, which makes me laugh because I think I always know the answer. And then,
Absolutely. And I think a caution, especially as for all our listeners, as you're in higher levels of leadership, can be some immense felt pressure to make decisions, right? And sometimes when you're in that level of pressure, you just want to be out of the pressure. So sometimes a decision is made because it's just like, I'm so tired of feeling the weight of this pressure. I'm just going to make a decision. But we got to be really careful that actually isn't necessarily good decision making. We have to actually be okay that there is sometimes where you will feel the tension of not having a decision yet while you're in discernment. And the tension is that there's simply a process that you must walk through, which requires a wrestling. And that's not going to be resolved necessarily overnight. And essentially, as a leader, we have to be okay with feeling the weight of that tension. Because unfortunately, I have seen where leaders are just like, all right, I'm just fatigued. I'm tired of the pressure of this. I'm just going to short circuit this discernment. I'm making a judgment call. I'm just going to kind of roll the dice. And sometimes it turns out, but sometimes there's a lot of train wrecks and people get hurt in that.
Yeah. Oh, Josh, thank you for that. That was a great answer. At Leader Impact, we are dedicated to leaders having a lasting impact. So as you continue through this amazing journey of life, and I'm just wondering if you've considered what you want your faith legacy to be when you leave this world.
Ooh. Well, I think for me, it comes back to giving away what I've received. I think this is what Jesus patterns out. It's like, hey, when you follow the invitation of Christ, the pattern is that you would be his disciple and that you would disciple others. And whether you're a Christian or not, I think this is a good principle to say, part of what I'm going to do is whatever I've received, I'm going to make sure that I'm passing that along. That my story is that I've had many people invest into my life and give a great resource to me and wisdom and counsel. And I want to make sure that I pass it on. And so I really do believe that it is a worthwhile investing into the next generation of young leaders. And I think we're in a really exciting time where that investment is going to pay off. The whole reason why my wife and I run Soul Edge, why our team in New Zealand invest and give of themselves, or our team in Canada give of themselves, is because we believe that if we want to see change and transformation in our culture, we got to invest into the young leaders who are going to end up in those leadership positions. And we've trained over hundreds of leaders in this, and we are seeing those leaders end up in places of significant leadership, and that has real impact. And it's really exciting, actually. There's some major cultural shifts right now we're seeing around faith and spirituality, around a hunger for God. There was a recent study actually that just came out by the Bible Society in the UK, and they're researching a pretty big group, like 19,000 people, and they polled in 2018, and then they polled again in 2024. And they're looking at one of the age groups was the 18 to 24 men, and in 2018 it was 4% were attending church. In 2024, 21% of that age group. This is the age group that's like the most engaged out of all the different age groups in church attendance. So I don't know of a study like this in Canada, but I wouldn't be surprised if if we see that sort of shift happening in Canada as well. So I think we're in a really exciting time where we're actually seeing young adults, young leaders step into places of leadership that they're not satisfied just sort of coasting through life. They do want to see change. They're deeply thinking about what's going to drive my life. They're the sort of narrative like, this young generation is not religious. They don't care about faith, about spirituality is not true, actually. That we are seeing in the UK, right? A country that's sort of been deemed secular, 21% in the 18 to 24 are attending church. That's a high number, right? So I think we need to actually be looking at some of the newer data coming out and saying, actually, there's some major shifts happening. We are in a really amazing time. And I think as leaders, it's a really important time to say, let's make sure that we're raising up and investing into those young leaders so they can be positioned well to succeed.
Yeah. The same message was heard at Apologetics Canada conference. They just said they're feeling it. There's a revival, and they're just feeling an increase in people coming to faith. So, great study. We need to do one in Canada. Our last question of the podcast is: what brings you the greatest joy, Josh?
My kids bring me so much joy. Yeah, I think just seeing them come alive as their own individuals, and I get to do like mentoring with them. But as a dad, it is such a privilege to walk with your kids, and they get to, they're obviously they're so gracious, right? Like sometimes I show up and I'm like, man, they're seeing me tired, but they're gracious. And then I see this just beautiful passion for the Lord starting to come up. And, my youngest daughter, she's getting baptized Easter Sunday. That's such a gift. So it is a true gift as parents to see our children follow in the footsteps of faith and to that gift of journeying alongside them. It's a short season, I recognize, but for me, it is a joyous season to get to walk alongside them.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful, Josh. Well, you and Kiri are clearly doing a fabulous job.
Oh, thank you.
At raising. So I just want to thank you. Our time has come to an end, Josh. It's been great. I've written lots of notes. You've given me a lot. I show up here to learn as much as I'm the host. I want to learn too. So just thank you. If people want to find out more about Josh, find out more about Soul Edge Ministries, how can they find you? What would be the best way to engage with you?
Yeah, the best way is probably just to go to our website. So they can just go to souledge.org. Contact info is there. You can check out our social media there. You can look at our testimonials, and everything about the course is all on that website.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you. And it was great to see you again. And I know I've met your wife and I've met your son, and I think your daughter was there too. So say hi to them for me.
I will. Thanks,
all right.
Lisa.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
You're welcome. All right. Well, if you're part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. If you are not yet part of Leader Impact but would like to find out more and grow your leadership, find our podcast page on our website at leaderimpact.ca and check out our free leadership assessment. You can also check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a comment, give us a rating or review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us. And remember, impact starts with you.